Execution.
The end of the line.
When most people think of execution, they usually think of the guillotine or the electric chair.
Whilst grim in their own right, they are relatively pain-free methods of getting the job done.
However,
throughout history, mankind has come up with ways to make your demise a little bit more excruciating.
Let's begin, shall we?
The art of crushing. First recorded over 4,000 years ago throughout Asia, crushing is exactly what it sounds like. Instead of using rocks, which was common, the Romans would occasionally turn to elephants to do the crushing for them. Death by crushing was always purposely slow and painful. In France, crushing was used as a base of interrogation, with heavier and heavier rocks being placed on the victim until they succumbed to the questions that they were being faced with. If the interrogators didn't like what they heard, then more rocks would be added, causing fatal suffocation.
The Spanish tickler, otherwise known as the cat's paw. This device had razor-sharp edges and was used to rip flesh away from the victim's bones. This item was also used as a weapon because of its clever design, which allowed it to cause damage without bones getting in the way. The victim would not die straight away from this brutal device. Instead, death would come days, even weeks later, when the incredibly deep wounds caused by the cat's paw would become infected.
Cement shoes. This iconic ritual was made popular by the American Mafia during the Prohibition era. The victim would have had their feet placed inside a pair of cinder blocks. The blocks would then be filled with wet cement. The victim would then be thrown into a body of water. The shoes acted as a weight, pulling the victim down to the very depths of the ocean, causing them to drown. Deep water was preferred as it reduced the chance of the body ever being found.
The blood eagle. This method has been mentioned in a number of ancient Nordic sagas dating right back to the 8th century. The ritual started with the victim's skin being deeply cut along the spine. This broke the ribs, which in turn made the victim's back resemble a pair of blood-soaked wings. The lungs were then pulled out through the wounds in the back, and if that wasn't bad enough, salt was then poured into the gaping holes, making this all the more brutal. And unfortunately for the victim, they had to stay silent. If they were to say a word whilst being executed, then they would never reach Valhalla when they died, or so they believed.
And finally, scaphism. Also named the boat, this execution was by far the most lingering. The unlucky victim was stripped naked and placed inside a pair of hollowed out tree trunks, with only their head, feet and hands protruding. The condemned was then force-fed a concoction of milk and honey. They were fed so much that it caused massive digestive complications. Honey was then poured over the victim, around the eyes, genitals, mouth and ears. This was to attract many biting and stinging insects. Unable to move, the victim was then pushed out into a stagnant pond and left there. Over time, insects would be intrigued by the foul smells and plentiful honey. They would breed, using the victim as a host, laying their eggs inside the skin, causing gangrene. To prolong the agony, the victim would then be force-fed the same mixture on a daily basis to avoid dehydration and starvation. Delirium would set in after around 3 days, and the condemned would usually die soon after that from septic shock.
I hope you weren't eating after that last one.
Don't forget to like and subscribe for more New Fusion action.
I've been LJ.
I've been Conrado 9001. Sleep tight.